Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. So today, as you can see here, we are going to talk about the Continental Drift Theory. So this Continental Drift Theory was proposed by a person whose name was Alfred Wegener. And this theory was proposed in the year of 1912. Now this person, Alfred Wegener, he was a meteorologist. Now being a meteorologist, he wanted to give a theory to reconstruct the climatic history of the world. Now, being a meteorologist, like I said, he wanted to reconstruct the climatic history of the world. But his studies included studying three different things. Number one, his study included studying different types of fossil elements or materials. Secondly, it included studying different types of landforms. And thirdly, it included studying different types of sedimentary accumulations. So, even if he was trying to reconstruct the climatic history of the earth, since his study was on the basis of fossil materials, landforms and sedimentary accumulations, he also proposed the theory which tried to reconstruct the locations of the continents and the oceans of the world. Fine. So, in order to understand the continental drift theory, first you have to understand different postulates which were proposed by Alfred Wegener. And by postulates, I am talking about different types of assumptions that he made in order to propose his theory. So now let us look at the different assumptions that he tried to make. The first assumption that he made, or the first postulate, was he believed or agreed with Edward Swiss. Now, this person, Edward Swiss, proposed a model which is called as your Sial, Sima and Knife. This is very simple to understand. Now, in general level, if you try to, in the basic understanding, if you try to say, Earth has three different layers. First is the crust. Then we have the mantle, and then lastly we have the core. Now this person, Edward Swiss, said that the crust is made up of Cl. Cl is nothing but silica plus aluminium. Similarly, he said that this mantle is made up of Sima. This Sima is nothing but silica plus magnesium. Okay, and finally the core, which is made up of knife. Knife is nothing but nickel plus iron. Okay, so the first postulate of Alfred Wegener was that he believed in Edward Swiss's model of Cl, Sima and knife. Now, Edward Swiss, this person also said that this Cl layer is continents and this Sima are nothing but the oceans. And he also said that these Cl continents were floating over the Sima oceans. Okay, so this is the first postulate. Second postulate that Alfred Wegener believed in, or he assumed, is that he said that during the Carboniferous period, Carboniferous era or period, which is between 350 to 300 million years ago. He said during the Carboniferous era or the period, there existed a huge continent. This is the equator, he said that there exists a huge continent in the southern hemisphere, which he termed as Pangaea. Then he also said that this Pangaea was surrounded by a huge mass of water or superocean. This is a supercontinent, and this supercontinent was surrounded by superocean, which he termed it as Panthalsa. Fine. So this was his second postulate. Now he says that while providing his theory, he said that this Pangaea during your mid-Mesozoic era, which is this Mesozoic era is usually between your 250 to 60 million years ago. So what did he say? He said that during the mid-Mesozoic era, you see this Pangaea, which he termed it as the supercontinent. He said that during the mid-Mesozoic era, this Pangaea broke down into two different continents. The one which is present north and this is south. The one which is present above, he called it as Laurasia or Angara. And the one which is present in the south, he called it as Gondwana. Now, next step, what happened? Now remember the chronology. He said that during the Carboniferous period, which is 350 to 300 million years ago, there existed a supercontinent called as the Pangaea, which was surrounded by a superocean which is called as the Panthalsa. Then he said that during the mid-Mesozoic era, as you can see here, which is around 250 to 60 million years ago, this Pangaea broke down into two parts, one in the north and one in the south. The one which is present in the north, he termed it as the Laurasia or Angara, and the one which is present in the south, he termed it as the Gondwana. Then the next thing that he says is that this Angara and this Gondwana started to have movements. This is Angara, this is Gondwana. He said that after it broke, it had two different types of movement, northward and secondly westward. Okay. So as these continents broke, what did he say? It had two different types of movement, one northward and another one westward. However, Wegener said that this northward as well as the westward movement of the continents were because of different reasons. He said the northward movement was because of centrifugal force, while the westward movement was because of gravitational pull of both the sun and the moon. Fine. So this was his main theory that he tried to give. Now in this background, now we have to understand how he determined the location of different mountains in the continents as well as different types of islands which exist on the earth and how it came because of these different types of movements. Now let us look at the different types of landforms that we get because of your westward movement of the continents. Now if you remember, the westward movement of the continents was because of your gravitational pull of the sun and the moon. Okay, first we will discuss about the westward movement and the landforms associated with it. Fine. Now let me draw this diagram again. This was your westward movement. Fine. Now if you remember the postulate or the assumption which was given by Wegener, he said that he believed or he agreed with Edward Seuss's model of Sea, Sima and Knife. But along with that, Edward Seuss also said that the Seal continents were floating over the Sima oceans. Now if you look at this continent here, as this continent was moving westward, what happened? The Seal continents scraped the ocean floors because of friction, of course. As it was moving westward, what happened? This CL continent scraped the ocean floor or the seama floors, and because of this scraping, what happened? Now this continent, as it was moving westward, or different types of continents which broke down eventually, as it was moving westward, if you see this part of the continent, which is your western part of the continents, it resulted in accumulation of sediments in this part. Fine. So here we can say that in the western margins of the continents, there resulted in accumulation of sediments, and these sediments that you see here, as this continent was moving, resulted in accumulation of sediments over a period of time. Now this accumulation of sediments over a period of time became so huge that it resulted in greater heights of the sediments. So Wegener said that with time, accumulation of sediments increased, and that resulted in increase in height of the sediments, which later on became nothing but what? Became mountains of the world. Now in order to substantiate this claim, he also gave two very important examples. Number one, he gave the example of Rockies. Now if you look at North America, this is a rough diagram, you see the presence of Rockies here. This is your Pacific Ocean. Now this is North America as a whole. Now as this North America, which in some time back was present here, was moving in the westward direction. As it was moving in the westward direction, the western margins of the North America collided or resulted in friction between the CL North America and the seama Pacific Ocean. Because of this, what happened? It resulted in accumulation of sediments here, and these sediments with time resulted in greater heights, which became later nothing but the Rockies. Similarly, he also gave another example. If we come below the North America, what do we have? Very obvious, we have the Andes mountain system. This is your South America. Now if you look at the presence of the Andes, where is the Andes located? Very obvious, Andes is located in the western margin of South America. So this was the first type of landform which Wegener proposed through his model. Okay, CL continents moving westward resulted in formation of the mountains of the world. This term is very important. Next thing that he proposed with the help of the western movement of the continents is your presence of your islands of the world. Now, if you look at the western movement of the continents, where do you find the presence of your mountains? Mountains are found in the western margins of the continents. On the contrary, he said that the islands of the world are not present on the western margins of the continents, but it is found along the eastern margins of the continents. Fine. Mountains, west margin. Islands, eastern margins. He said that if you look at this diagram again, as the CL was moving westward, resulted in formation in the western parts of the continents. But the same continent or the CL continent, as it was moving westward, what happened? This trailing part that you see here, as the continents move westward, the eastern margins of the continents remains to trail back, resulting in formation of your islands. Let me substantiate this. Wegener said, or in order to substantiate his claim, he gave certain examples. For example, if you look at the eastern margins of the continents of Africa, this is Africa. What do we find here? We find an island here on the eastern margins of the continents. What is this? This is nothing but the Madagascar. Fine. Then he also said to look at Australia. This is just a rough diagram. This is Australia. In the eastern continent or the eastern margins of the continents, what do we find here? We find here the presence of New Zealand. Then we also have here the Tasmania. Now, if you look at India, this is the South India. Here we have the presence of Sri Lanka, and here we have the presence of Andaman. Fine. Similarly, he gave other examples, like for example, if you look at South Asia, in the eastern margins of the South Asia, we find the presence of different islands, like we have the Japan, we have Philippines, Indonesia, etc. Fine. So, with the help of the western movement of the continents, he gave two different types of landforms. One, formation of the mountain system of the world. Secondly, islands. He said the mountains are present, or the important mountains of the world are present where? On the western margins of the continents, like the Rockies and the Andes. Similarly, we have the presence of the islands, which is found in the eastern margins of the continents. Now, you can ask me here, sir, why don't we have the Himalayas on the western margins of the continents if we are talking about the western movement of the continents, right? Now, this is a different scenario which will come into picture if we talk about the northward movement of the continents. So, initially we were talking about the westward movement, and because of which we had the presence of the mountains in the western part. Now, if we have to understand why the Himalayas is not present in the western margins of the continents, Wegener tried to explain that with the help of your northward movement of the continents, which was because of the centrifugal forces. He said that with time, as the Indian subcontinent was moving towards Eurasia, this is Indian subcontinent. He said as the Indian subcontinent was moving northward, here we had the presence of a sea. Now, if your basics are clear, you can easily tell me that here we have the presence of a Tethys Sea. So, Wegener said that as the Indian subcontinent was moving northward towards Eurasia, it resulted in collision between Indian subcontinent and the Eurasia, and because of that, what happened? All the sedimentary accumulations or the sedimentary materials which are present here got accumulated, which with time resulted in formation of the Himalayas. This can be understood if you look at the side profile of this diagram. This is the Indian continent, this is Eurasia. So, as the Indian plate was moving towards the Eurasia, it resulted in collision, and because of this collision, all the sedimentary deposits which are found in the Tethys Sea resulted in formation of your Himalayas. Fine. So, this was the basic model which was proposed by Wegener through his continental drift theory. In the next class, we will be talking about what are the different types of evidences which Wegener provided in order to substantiate his claim in the different types of movements, as well as the presence of different continents in the contemporary world, and how it happened, and how the different landforms are present in different locations of the continents, like the Rockies, Andes, the islands, the Himalayas, etc. So, in the next class, we will be talking about the different evidences that he provided. Along with that, we will be also talking about the criticism that he faced, or his model faced, because of certain lack in clarity. Thank you.